Who's he doing? Really?
The first thing Maisie said to me wasn't really a bark. It was this long, funny woo that made me stop and stare at her.
Oh, you sassy little thing.
She kept doing it almost like she had been waiting years to tell someone everything on her mind. I had never met a dog quite like her, but the truth was, she'd already lived through so much before we ever found each other.
Maisie. Ice. Right?
For nearly 3 years, Maisie spent her life in a crate outside. That little space was almost her whole world. Nobody took her for walks or spent time with her, and she was never treated like part of the family. She had been kept for one reason only. They hoped she would have puppies.
Maisie, who's the best girl? Who is it? You know it.
When that never happened, they gradually stopped caring about her. Eventually, they decided she wasn't worth keeping anymore. They didn't want to spend money on a dog they believed had failed to meet their expectations. Thankfully, before things went any further, a family friend stepped in and took Maisie away. She was brought to a shelter, and for the first time in her life, she finally had a real chance to start over.
High five. Yeah, good girl. Good job, Moo.
Around that same period, my own life felt incredibly empty. I had recently lost my pitbull, who had been by my side for 13 wonderful years. Not long after that, I also lost both my father and my mother. Those losses left a quiet sadness that seemed to follow me everywhere. One day, a friend tagged me in a shelter post featuring Maisie. It was just a simple picture, but something about her face made me stop scrolling. I decided to go meet her in person. The moment I saw her, I knew I wasn't leaving without her.
Ready?
Bringing Maisie home was both exciting and heartbreaking. She had spent so long living inside a crate that my house seemed completely overwhelming. She would walk a few steps, stop in the middle of the room, and simply look around, trying to understand where she was and what all these unfamiliar sights and sounds meant.
They do it.
Later that same day, I took her outside and tossed a ball for her. She chased after it, and that's when I heard that unforgettable woo for the first time. Then she did it again, and again. It didn't sound frightened or nervous. It sounded happy. It felt like she had finally found a place where she could let her feelings out after keeping them inside for so long.
You gonna whoop? That's impressive.
Even so, I could still see pieces of her past. She moved carefully, always a little unsure, and it was obvious trust wasn't something that could return overnight. As we settled into life together, I started noticing something that surprised me. Somehow, Maisie always seemed to know when I was having a difficult day. Whenever grief felt especially heavy, she wouldn't stay across the room. She'd walk right over, lean against me, and gently lick my face. It happened enough times that it never felt accidental. It was as if she could sense exactly when I needed comfort. The longer she stayed with me, the harder it became to believe that meeting her had simply been chance. While she was learning what it meant to have a real home, she was also helping fill a place in my heart that had felt empty for a very long time.
Maisie Moo.
As months passed, I watched her become more relaxed and confident. One of the sweetest parts was seeing her with the other animals in my life. I have a cat named Motor, and I expected their introduction to take some time. Instead, Motor accepted Maisie almost immediately, as though she'd always belonged there. She reacted the same way with my horses. There wasn't any fear or hesitation. She walked up to them with quiet curiosity, stretched out her nose as if she wanted to give them a little kiss, and before long, she was comfortable enough to lie down and fall asleep in the stall beside them.
Maisie, come here, love.
Looking at her then, it was hard to believe she was the same dog who had once been dismissed as unwanted. Now, she'd race through the house in joyful zoomies, filling every room with those long, unmistakable woo sounds.
Who's the cutest? You are? That's what I thought. What else? I know. You are.
Over time, I realized those sounds weren't random at all. That was simply how Maisie communicated. She'd woo when she was excited, when she was happy, or when she wanted my attention. It became her own special language, and before long, I found myself answering back. It honestly felt like we were having little conversations every day.
What?
Sometimes I think about how close Maisie came to never getting this life, and how close I came to never meeting her. She arrived when I needed her more than I realized, and somewhere along the way, she became family. I often catch myself thinking that my parents would have absolutely adored her. I wish they could have met the chatty little dog who never seems to run out of things to say.